Hey, what's up everybody, Isaac here with another New World video, and today we are outside of the Starstone dungeon. That is because yesterday we had the new mutation drop, and we have the Starstone mutation. It is currently a nature mutation. And yesterday I dropped a video doing an M2. It was only my second time through, but I was learning as I went, so it was a little bit sloppy, but figured I'd put it out for any of you looking to check it out before you run through for your first time, just so you know what to expect. But today I'm going to do a guided walkthrough, so there is also going to be some tanking guide stuff going on here. So if you're just here to watch the run through, go ahead and check out the timestamps, and I will go ahead and drop those. But otherwise, if you're here for the tanking build and the guide and the attributes and how I am running for this one, just go ahead and stick around and check that stuff out. So first off, we are going to cover the gear. So I do have the 5-piece charter set, and very strong ancient tanking set. All strength, refreshing ward, which is very good as a tank. Ancient ward is the must-have perk, and invigorated. Not really that helpful, but it's there. At least it's something. So it's kind of like a quarter of a perk, where these are two really good perks. And so we got 5 set of that, and of course we have the gems, the nature damage absorption gems, all of our armor, and all of our jewelry. And our jewelry here, we have nature protection amulet. If you're just getting started, you might not be able to afford to buy one of these, or you might not have gotten lucky enough to get a drop, but definitely recommend as soon as you can start getting a damage protection amulet for each type. For example, this week in Iliad, it is an ice mutation, so you would be looking for an amulet with frozen protection if you were going to go and run that one. So something you should work towards getting. Is going to make you a lot stronger in these dungeons. And our ring, the two important ones here that I like, leeching and hardy. So these are the ones I like to have. There's some other options you could get away with instead of leeching, but hardy is going to give you more stamina for blocking, more stamina for dodging. Crippling, not a must-have, but it does work out decent. I'd be fine with something different here, but even with just the 2-perker you could get away with. But crippling, it's not bad because I do have some slows that I'm going to be applying, so it's a little nice extra bonus. Earring, regenerating, nice to have, definitely can get away with different perks, but refreshing toast is the must have. So make sure you have refreshing toast and just try to have 2 other good perks that will help you out a little bit here. Refreshing evasion, good perk to have, not like crazy OP, but it's definitely a decent perk. So that is our jewelry and our weapons. We are kind of building to do a little bit of extra damage with this build. So definitely you don't have to work this way. You can go more damage mitigation, more utility, but I am building this specific video for doing a little bit of extra damage and helping our team do a little bit of extra damage. So a lot of my videos have been, my very first one I talked a lot about using the leadership perk, but I also mentioned how it's very viable to go defender side if you're just beginning, or also it is also very viable at the highest levels. And I've showed you the majority of my M10 runs, I've been using this full defender side just to show you that they are very good at the top level, and they actually can be effective at the top level. They can be better in certain situations just to go full defender side. But for this video, we are going leadership, and that's going to help everyone in our team do an extra 10% damage, which is a significant damage boost. So we won't quite get into that tree yet, but we will talk about it. We're going to continue talking about the gear that we're using. So our sword that we're using, it's got Ancient Bane, which is obviously extra damage. Enchanted, obviously extra damage for every light and heavy attack we do. And then Empowering Leaping Strike, which we are taking. So that is a nice little bonus. And I picked this sword up the last time I ran Lazarus, or the last week of mutations. So I decided to level this up and use it for a little bit of a DPS tanking build. And so all 3 of these are going to help us do extra damage. Empowering Leaping Strike, sword attacks deal 31% additional damage to target, slowed by Leaping Strike's Cowardly Punishment upgrade. So in order to make the most use out of this, we got to make sure that we take Empower and Leaping Strike all the way down the tree. And we'll show you what that is. So Cowardly Punishment. Unsuccessful hit, inflict 30% slow. So having that crippling on our ring, it's going to help, for things like this. We're going to apply slow for longer, then we're going to be able to do damage to them for longer. So definitely a nice little bonus. But if in order for this perk to work on our sword, we do have to take this all the way to the bottom. So back to our weapons here. That covers the sword. Of course, we got the taunting gem. And notice the trading post and player trading has been temporarily disabled. Interesting. Okay, so we got our hatchet here. Very nice hatchet. This is kind of my preferred hatchet to be running. Obviously, we got the gem, Carnelian for taunts. We have Chain Arcane. I absolutely love to have Chain. It's going to help us do more damage. And more damage means killing enemies faster, but it also means generating more threat. And as a tank, that's definitely important. Refreshing Torrent. This is the big one. You definitely can get away without having it, but I strongly recommend going this route. Refreshing Torrent. It's great for DPS. It's great for tanks. And then Ancient Bane, of course, this is the one that's going to help us do more damage. You don't have to have Ancient. You don't have to have the Bane on your hatchets. As a tank, if you're first getting started off, I'd say go ahead and just get a generic hatchet that has Refreshing Torrent that you can use in all of your dungeons. And then, as you run more and more and you can afford to get a hatchet specifically for each dungeon with Bane, so much the better. And I do prefer it to have strength, but it can be okay if it has dex or con as well, and we'll get a little bit more into that when we talk about the attribute distribution. So, very strong hatchet. Very damage oriented, but also very utility oriented. With this Refreshing Torrent, it basically allows us to have endless taunts, which is very, very helpful as a tank. So, that covers those two weapons, and now let's talk about the shield. So this shield, it has both Ancient Ward and Ancient Bane. So you aren't really going to be able to get your hands on these type of shields until you start running the mutations themselves. This one drops from Lazarus. It's going to come with Ancient Bane, but then the rest of the perks are kind of random that they can be. This Diminishing Shield Bash, it's not a very good perk, but it doesn't help us at all since we don't have Shield Bash anyways. But so basically it's a 2-perk shield, but they're two very, very good perks. Ancient Ward, damage absorption. Ancient Bane is going to be extra damage. And we are actually just keeping the same shield on for the whole run, so it's not going to help us a lot in the lost portion. None of these perks will give us any benefit, but I just don't feel like taking the time to change it. And not the end of the world. As the tank, it isn't our number one priority to output damage. We do want to when we can, but it's also a small portion of the dungeon. We just want to make sure that we are ready to go and the first one's ready to walk in on the next fight. So, not too worried about changing out our shield for that small portion of the dungeon. And the other thing here, I'll talk about first. We are going to be switching sets to Lost here because we got a small portion of the dungeon that's lost. But let's go over the attributes quick before we do that. So these are the attributes I was running. The main reason I was full strength is my first M1 I ran, I used the hammer as my off weapon, and obviously hammer only scales off of strength, no dex, so that's why I went full 360 strength. So it actually would have been better if I didn't go full 360 strength since I went sword and hatchet. And, well, here's why. Pay attention to these numbers. 1178, 1160. So we're going to respec and we're going to go to the same 150 con. And honestly, I'd suggest go 200 con. It's going to give you a plus 10% increased physical and elemental armor. But, if you're comfortable, go ahead and drop a few extra con. Once I get up to M10, I might jump back up to a 200 con for the first couple of runs just to be safe. But we'll see. So we go up to 150 con. And with this idea that I'm talking about, I would actually go all the way down to 250 strength if I could. But based on the food I'm taking and all of the strength on all of my gear, 257 is the lowest I can go. I could take a different food, but it's a little more expensive and not worth just saving that 7 extra points. But here's why. I have talked a lot about going to 300 strength to get the grit that comes at 300 strength with your basic attacks. But sure, that is nice to have, and I've talked about how it can be fairly important, but it's not as overly absolute must-have important as many people try to make it sound like it is. And you're actually a lot better off getting to know the mechanics and being able to avoid them with dodges and so on and so forth than having to rely on grit. So the 300, it's nice, but it's not as important as some people make it seem out to be. So the 250 is actually pretty important because stamina regen is faster while performing basic attacks with a melee weapon. So the 250 is more important than the 300 that people love to talk about. And here's why you're just as well to stop off at 250, especially if you're trying to output damage. Remember those numbers we talked about, like 1167, 1180 or something like that? So we go 257 strength and then we crank the rest into dex, and well, what do you know? These numbers jump up to 1234 and 1215. So we're doing more damage by dropping strength and adding some dex. And here's why. Beyond 250 strength, you have diminishing returns. So both the sword and the hatchet, they scale stronger off of strength, but they also scale off of dex. So the diminishing returns after 250, you're going to get better returns out of going to dexterity. Plus, we do get these bonuses, plus 10% critical chance to get a critical hit, which is nice, and then plus 5% thrust damage. So on our sword and shield, we are going to be doing some heavy attacks, and we get thrust damage off of our heavy attacks. So a nice little bonus, not like massive, 5% damage on that one attack. So not a massive bonus, but it's helpful on top of the additional damage that we're already getting. So good to do it even without this bonus, but this extra bonus is just a little bit of icing on the cake. So if you were going to say 200 con, then just go to 58 dexterity. That's perfectly fine. So you'd be 250 strength, 50 dex, and then 200 con. That would be a perfect build as well. And so the 300, it's nice to have, but it's not as all important, all being that some people make it sound out to be. So if I was being a little bit better at perfecting my build, this is what I would have ran. But I did just go straight strength. And that's just because I guess I was too lazy to fix my attributes after running my first one with full strength using the hammer. So anyways, that is the build I used, and just a little bit more of some theory crafting for you, and something you can take into consideration with making your builds. So we do switch out to our lost gear halfway through. Our lost gear isn't very good. We basically have, this is our best one here. We have Lost Ward and we have Refreshing Ward, which is very good as a tank, and we got the right attributes. Strength. Critical Retribution doesn't work in dungeons. So our chest piece, we're not using hammer, so Legion Path of Destiny does nothing for us. Luck, nice to have. Excuse me. Nice to have, but doesn't help you from a performance standpoint. So this is just a one perker. Lost Ward plus nature damage. Another one perker, Lost Ward, nature damage. Nice to have, but performance-wise, no. And another one this is like a quarter of a perk. The Invigorated, it's there. It does something, but it's really not that great for dungeons. So not a lot of rend. Certain dungeons, if you're negating rend, it can be helpful, but... So then our boots, this one is a decent boot other than it has 10 focus, which is absolutely useless to us. So we have luck, which is nice for drops, but performance doesn't help us. So we got the Lost Ward, must have. Refreshing is a good perk. So we have a good 2-perker here. So we have two 2-perkers and then 2 1-perkers and then one 1 1/4 perker. So not the greatest gear, as you can see, for the lost portion. But one thing that is handy, without switching my attributes, I do go to 200 Constitution, and these attributes, they're in a decent place. So I don't have to bother with switching my attributes for that small portion. All the extra bonus, if you don't have to monkey around with attributes for that portion. As a tank, you want to be the first one ready if possible. Get ready to go in and be ready to, just go in and start tanking things for your team. So we do get switched over, and then of course, once we get done with the lost portion, we just switch on back. So we covered our weapons, and I didn't end up changing out any kind of lost bane weapons. It's just a small portion of the dungeon, and that's not my number one job to be doing high output damage, but at least for 2/3 of the dungeon, I have some pretty good damage output. So that covers all of the gear, and let's go ahead and cover our build. So the sword and shield build. So yeah, we talked a lot about going full defender side and before, and that's how most of my runs have been going. And I also did talk about using the leadership perk quite a bit in my first video, and I think that's the one I cover the most. But then I ran most of my dungeons defender side just to show you that it is viable even at the highest levels, and it's also very good at the highest levels. But if you're looking to help with more damage output versus damage mitigation, this is a build that you can use, and it's going to have the leadership perk that gives everybody in our team an extra 10% damage. So we do go leaping strike all the way to the bottom because it's going to, well, for one, we get extra movement with leaping strike. If you don't have that specific perk, it's not so important to go all the way down to the bottom on this specific skill. It's enough just to take the skill without the extra perks. So in order to get leadership, we do need quite a few skills on this side, but plus a lot of the skills on this side, they help us do extra damage. So that's what we are going for. Empowered stab, successful heavy attacks grant you 30% empower for 5 seconds. 30% empower, that's obviously pretty significant. So we're going to be perking that one a lot. We're going to be doing a lot of heavy attacks. So in final attack in your light attack chain, inflicts a 20% slow for 2 seconds. So we already mentioned like how our ring has, that extra slow is extended. So a little bit beneficial to add this perk here. When you block an attack, in a stack of 3% empower for 5 seconds, and max of 5 stacks, so some more damage output. And sword and shield, critical strike chance increased by 10%. More crits equals more damage. Deal 10% more damage to slowed foes. So, like I said, we're going to be applying slow, and then our ring helps the slow be sustained longer. And honestly, others on our team might be applying some slow here and there too. So definitely a nice perk, whether we apply slow or our teammates apply slow. This is going to help us do some more damage. While health is full, deal 15% more damage. Obviously, as the tank, we're constantly getting heals. So we are going to be at full health often enough to make this perk worthwhile. Then on critical, gain 20% haste for 5 seconds. Haste is really handy as a tank, helps you get that movement to get where you need to be, whether it's getting out of trouble or whatever it might be, getting into the right position to tank something. Haste is beneficial, so we grab that one. And then while holding the sword, damage of all group members is increased by 10%. So that kind of covers the sword master side of things. It's kind of all about using the sleeping strike for movement, and then the leadership for the increased damage to everybody. A bunch of extra perks to help us do damage as well. Reverse stab is a very good perk. If you go all the way down to the bottom, on a successful hit with reverse stab, you make all your cooldowns shorter. This is very handy on lots of builds, but I personally don't like it when I am running Hatchet. It's just not needed. So, defender side, obviously, if you take Shield Bash, it gives you a taunt, and it stuns the weapons, so it's actually a pretty good ability. But for this one, we're not taking it. We are going with Shield Rush, and the thing for me that really makes Shield Rush good, some people will just take Shield Rush, but to me, without going down to the second perk, Shield Rush isn't that great. And some people disagree. They say, no, just get Shield Rush and don't go down. But On a successful hit, all enemies within 5 meters are weakened 10% for 10 seconds. So that's a huge amount of utility for your whole team. You're going to apply weaken, and it's going to help your whole team take 10% less damage. So very, very nice perk here. And then, of course, Defender's Resolve. That is our big AoE taunt. And we do take it all the way down to the bottom. There's several different options you could go here. You could use this one if your health is above 50%. Damage reduction is increased by 20%. So that's obviously pretty strong. There's a lot of times you're going to be popping this when your health is above 50%. Because you're going to be popping it when you're going to use it for a big AoE taunt when you go and set yourself up to block a big group of mobs. So there's a lot of times that this perk is going to indeed help us out. And then if you do go all the way to the bottom when Defender's Resolve ends, heal for 15% of your max damage. So say you go into a situation that's going to be a little bit sticky, you go ahead and you pop your big taunt, and you get that damage mitigation at first, but then you start to lose some of your health, and then when this ends, you get a nice little top up. Also, it comes in very handy if your healer gets knocked, or if you get into a sticky situation where you're running around, kiting stuff, and you pop this, and it's going to give you that extra nice little bonus heal. So just based on all the perks we're taking, a very nice perk that we do miss out on. And you could definitely argue that maybe it'd be more important to take this one than this one. But, it's going to depend on your group if you're more dependent on your healer or not. But if you got a good group, you don't necessarily need this one. All incoming healing and regeneration is increased by 10%. But this can be a very strong perk for sure. You definitely could argue taking this one over this one. But you gotta skip out on a few perks, so we skip out on that one. And Sturdy Shield grants an additional 15% physical armor. So this is huge for a tank. This is you could get away without having it, but pretty tough to pass up on this one. And reduce all damage from all magical types by 10%. Obviously, also very, very strong. Just a free additional 10% damage absorption from all elemental types of damage, or magical types. And then stamina damage is reduced by 15% when blocking melee attack with shield, which is obviously pretty huge. With the whole point of the sword and shield is to have good blocks, and this is going to make that block even better. So we do miss out on some really good potentials here, but you gotta pick and choose a little bit. You can't take everything. So this is the build that I am specifically ending up with. So absolutely love this for helping our team do more damage. Absolutely love this for the leaping strike, which gives us movement, whether we just are trying to run through the dungeon faster, or we just want to get into a good position and drop a taunt, or let's say we're tanking a bunch of mobs and then we see a mob take off after a healer. We can turn around and take a leaping strike at that mob, and we hit them with some slow, so they can't really attack our healer anymore. We get the aggro back of that mob that was running after a healer, and there we go. That's why another reason why leaping strike is so good. But that covers that build. We'll show you the hatchet real quick. We've covered this so many times, not going to go super in depth again, but obviously Berserk. All these here were taken. Defy Death, no brainer. If you're taking Hatchet and you're not taking Defy Death, what are you doing? But we are taking Raging Torrent because of Refreshing Torrent on our Hatchet. If I didn't have Refreshing Torrent, I wouldn't take this. But we're taking Rending Throw. Absolutely love this. There's definitely an argument to take Infected Throw instead, and it actually could be quite good in this dungeon just because it's the nature mutation, so it would help reduce a lot of healing. So it's definitely a valid argument to take Infected Throw instead of Rending Throw. It actually might be more beneficial. So I do have Rending Throw, but you definitely could argue that Infected Throw would be better for the nature mutation. We are taking an aim throw, which allows us to throw hatchets, whether we're trying to grab aggro on something or we're trying to do a little damage while we're at a distance, because we had to run away for one reason or another. Just lets us do some damage from a safe distance if need be. And yeah, nothing too crazy here, but critical hits with light attacks and aim throws regenerate 10 stamina. This is very good because as a tank, stamina is very important. So this is going to help us regen a whole lot of stamina when we're sitting there hacking away with light attacks. But we're mostly trying to stick to the sword and board whenever we can. We're mostly just going to use Hatchet for the big taunt and for the rending throws, because whenever we have our sword out, we're going to help everyone on our team do an extra 10% damage. So the main thing is using our sword and board, other than using the Hatchet for the taunts and the rending throw. And we get down here, all attacks deal 10% additional damage to targets with an active debuff. Of course, they're going to always have debuffs on them, so this is going to be perking always, pretty much. Don't hatch that hit targets with an active debuff, reduce all Hatchet cooldown abilities by 5%. This one's not gonna perk a whole ton, but it will some, because typically we're gonna use rending throw and then switch back to our sword and board to give our teammates extra damage. But let's say we throw a rending throw and then we throw more hatchets at that, this is going to come into play. But that covers the Hatchet build. And so we covered our gear, we covered the builds, we covered the attributes. Let's go ahead and walk you through the run. And we are off. So this first little group, you can kill them all right at the top, or you can just go ahead and pull them right down to the bottom. If you do fight them up top, those archers, they will walk most of the way up, but like usual, it's better if you go ahead and just stack on the range, because the range, they won't typically pull to the melee, but the melee, they'll pull to the range. You do have that one javelin guy back there, so he'll sit and throw javelins at you for a while, but usually eventually he'll stack and come do some melee type of damage. So just kind of ignore him. Hopefully he comes in stack and you can just go ahead and finish him off. So kind of like typical, once your DPS has everything low, kind of go ahead and move on. You can see I didn't move along quite as soon as I could have, but so this part I'm just gonna go ahead and drop a taunt on those little guys, so that way they're going to stay focused on me for quite a while before they start turning on our DPS. And I use my movement to go and jump where I want to be, pop another taunt. We get everything just nice and grouped up here, and go ahead and nuke them right on down. So that's one thing I love about having the leaping strike is, well, it's going to help me get into position. And right here on this boss, kind of a reaver that likes to go take off and go run through you. So I typically try and hit him with a leaping strike, and sometimes that will stop him from taking off on me. So if you wait a little bit longer till you get into range, he'll usually go ripping right through you. But use your leaping strike and hit him before he has a chance to react, and just makes that stack nice and easy. There's definitely going to be a few places in this dungeon we're going to try and take advantage of line of sighting things. So on this part, it is good if once you start getting things a little bit low, if one of your DPS or even the healer, he drops his nice sacred on the group, and then he goes and starts opening this door just to save a little bit of time. Start opening up those seals instead of waiting until everything's killed. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and use my leaping strike to get into the action. Go ahead, jump in the middle, and pop a nice big old AoE taunt, and sit there and tank everything, try and do a little bit of damage along the way, but let my DPS and everybody else nuke everything right on down. So there's a little resource node that somebody's got to go and grab on the right side, and meanwhile everybody else is going to go left. So these lasers, they're going to insta-kill you if you touch them, so you definitely want to try the best you can to avoid getting too many deaths. They can definitely ruin your run. You definitely have a little bit of leeway on this run. You can even get like 5 knocks and you can actually still beat with gold. Kind of surprising that you can get so many knocks and still gold on this one, but maybe it's because they figure a lot of people are going to die to these lasers. So a few of these lasers are going to have different mechanics. This one looks like it stays a pretty steady pace. When it's right at the top, you can just run through it standing up. If you're light armor, you can do a dodge roll through most of them, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. But if you're in heavy armor like I am, just one thing right here, there is 1 star medal that you have to go and collect. So easy to miss that one, but what you're going to want to do, you jump off to the left. You can see those guys, they were able to climb around the laser. I just ran under it by going to the right. And what you can do here is you can have your whole team wait right here. And one person can go all the way around and unlock this, little laser thing. So if you go back and watch my first video, you'll see that I walked through the laser maze so you can see what you actually have to do. But in this video, I'm just letting my teammates go and unlock it. It's not really worth it to even if you have it down, just have one person that's got it down good. They can go do the maze, they can go ahead and unlock it, and it's going to open up a little staircase for everybody else to climb across. So that means that there's just less chance of people getting knocked. So opens up a stairwell, and then you just go ahead and walk right on through the laser with the protection of your teammate. That has the little laser disengagement tool thingamajinger. So you get through here, and he can go ahead and drop his little protection orb. Realistically, I guess you could even use it through these lasers, I suppose, but not really needed. Just go ahead and get through there. Kill these nice little mobs. And this next laser, you're going to want to pay attention to. Sometimes it moves fast and then it slows down. So pay attention. When it slows down, take advantage of it and run through it then. But if it's going slow, be careful. It's going to speed up. So to be really safe, wait until it speeds up, and then as soon as it starts to slow down, go then. So you know that you're not on the cycle of, oh, it's going slow, so I'm going to go through, then all of a sudden it speeds up on you, and it takes you out. So just a little word of advice. For some of them, they do change speeds. Wait for it to go fast, then when it slows down again, then make your move. Just a little bit safer option. But once you practice it a few times, you'll probably get a death or two to them, but after a while, you'll get it down for sure. Now, obviously, the nice thing about running through it at low levels, M1s, M2s, M3s, you can still get like a bronze, and you can still unlock the next levels. So you get a little leeway. You can practice at the low levels and still unlock your next mutation, even if you do get a bunch of deaths and end up getting a bronze. So this part, I usually go ahead and line of sight everything. We go ahead, we walk through here, we get little taunts and everything, we collect the aggro, and then we just come and hide behind this little wall. Instead of fighting everything in a big mess, so we let everything come to us. You can see those archers, they walked right in, which, can be annoying chasing down all those archers. And anything that comes in, we're going to go ahead and take it out. Anything that decides to not follow us up, that's fine. We're just going to move right along to the next step. So what I like to do here, taunt the first set, and then go ahead and stack on these second mobs. You can see how handy those leeching vines come in. I get everything into place, and I can buy myself some time with the leeching vines if need be. I go ahead and hit everything with the leeching vines, and it roots everything into place. You can see some of those mobs from back yonder, they finally did catch up with us. But that's what's nice about line of sight into everything. You just get around a corner, you get everything to stack up in one place instead of fighting a bunch of different mobs in a bunch of different places. And once again, somebody should be getting started on opening the portal for the sake of saving a little bit of time. Somebody should start mining that resource, which they do. And just like that, the final mob is dead, and the next door is almost open and ready for us. So this part here, there's going to be a range guy at the bottom of the steps, but then there's two archers at the top. So no matter what, you don't get everything to stack up, but I usually go with the option of stacking on the two archers. So that way there's only one range guy, that little mage guy left at the bottom. Stack on the two archers and just have a nice little AoE fest on everything up top. Obviously that little purple circle, it can be annoying and cause problems, but that's the route I decide to take, is I bring everything up the steps and stack on the two archers. You can have one guy go ahead and sit on the mage in the meantime, but pretty much just an AoE party. Take everything out, and as soon as you finish with these mobs here, don't forget to grab this resource node. for your points, but this is where we are going to end up switching to the Lost. So obviously you're going to have to wait until you're out of combat, so I go ahead and I run down this little ramp, just get a little bit closer while I'm buying time until I'm out of combat, and we're just going to go ahead and pop all of our Lost gear on. So this very first guy, he actually hits pretty hard. Kind of surprised me the first time I went up against him, just how hard he hits. But he can be a pain. But once you learn his mechanics, he's not so bad. You can dodge his big hits. So he does like this big double-fisted overhead slam that's going to stun you, and then he'll start doing a bunch of side swipes. And if you get caught outside of a heal and you get stunned, you can get yourself into trouble. So that's when you're going to want to switch to your hatchet if you're stunned. Well, then you can switch to the hatchet, and just in case he does get you down to 0 health, you got that life save. So we go ahead and we try to pop our taunt on him before he comes away from being immune. And if it's an AoE taunt, you can still apply your taunt before he stops being immune. A shield bash, it won't work until he is not immune any longer. But the AoE taunts, they do work. So, kind of the big thing here is we're trying to dodge that big overhead slam he just did. You see, we didn't, we weren't successful on that one. Once again, we weren't successful on this one. I think he caught me with a lot of the overhead slams. The round before this, I managed to dodge just about all of them, but this round, he caught me with a lot of them again. So that's the big thing, though, that you're going to want to do. Just try and dodge. He does that little puke thing. Go ahead and try to dodge that if you can. And, his side swipes, they're not so important, but if you can avoid that big, huge slam down, that's the one you want to avoid. But you can see every time the little mobs are spawning in, I'm trying to taunt everything. So hopefully I have a taunt up and ready. So for the most part, you don't have to be taunting the big guy as long as you keep attacking him. You start the initial threat by taunting him and then doing damage. But for the most part, you don't need to keep burning your taunts as long as you're doing damage. And then as soon as he spawns in some new mobs, go ahead and pop a big old AoE taunt and you will be good to go. So we ended up having a guy that his game crashed, just the way things go with gaming. Sometimes somebody loses internet connection, sometimes, well, the game just goes ahead and crashes on you, and that's what happened to him. He had a crash, so we had to 4-man this dungeon for quite a while. So we had to kill some time. We still were able to finish in time, but we ended up buying some time. We did end up finding an extra DPS that was willing to go in, just in case he didn't come, but he did end up joining us back, and we did manage to get it just in time. So there's one room where we figured out it's best to actually pull one of the mobs out before going in. And for a second I mistook this for being that room, but yeah, it's not. This ain't that room. So just go right in. There's nothing too crazy in this room. Get a nice heal and just AoE everything down. There's no named guys in this room. You should have your Lost gear on, so it's going to mitigate the damage a lot from everything in this room. But later on, there is one room that has a big fire ghost, and at that point, you're typically going to have your ancient gear on. I suppose if you wanted, you could leave a couple of pieces of Lost gear on, but I'd say just go ahead and leave your ancient gear on. And, well, I'll show you how we handled it quite nicely. So this next little part here, right on the left, there's a little chest you gotta grab a little key thing from. But we just go ahead and knock out these first couple of mobs. Somebody's gonna go ahead and open that chest and grab the key. So the next room after this, there's going to be a little platform that you go ahead and you apply that key, and it's going to summon a boss. But I would suggest go ahead and kill all the ads in that room before summoning that boss. You can go ahead and, summon it and AoE everything down, but especially since we're only 4-man at this point, we are just going to kill the ads before summoning the boss. But even if you aren't 4-man, I'd say go ahead, kill all the ads first, and then summon the boss. Just, you have enough time to do it, so that's how I'd suggest doing it, at least at first, to get used to it. And from there, if you decide it's easy enough to kill everything all in one big AoE fest, go ahead, summon the boss, and stack up everything with one. But it is a pretty annoying boss, one of those ghosts, kind of got a lot of HP, plus the nature. You know, the nature mutation, got some healing going on. So, pretty basic here. We just come and grab this one ad. We're kind of a little bit killing time waiting for our teammates, so we're not trying to run through real fast. Typically, I would go ahead and grab the aggro on everything, stack it all up, and take it out with one big AoE fest. But we're just kind of slowly moving through, trying to kill a little bit of time while we're talking, discussing what we're going to do. Are we going to find a new DPS? You know, or hopefully we wait for our old DPS and hopefully he actually does come back in. But you just never know. You don't want a good run going to waste just because you lose a DPS, and if you have the chance to find a new one, well, maybe that's the option we have to take. We did end up finding one of our teammates had a DPS that was willing to join in, but preferably we don't make the other guy throw away his run just because of an internet connection that screws him over, or the game crashing screws him over, or something like that. But he actually does end up coming back on, so we do get him back in, and even though we lost a lot of time, we do end up still beating the dungeon just fine. So, you know, I didn't quite get the M10 version yet, but I think once you get this dungeon down, there's a few parts that miscommunication can cause things to go south pretty fast. But once you got this dungeon down, if you got a decent group, I think this is going to be a pretty nice dungeon for running through, getting your reasonably easy gold at the M10 level. Doesn't take crazy long. It'll be around a 30-minute run. You're going to probably be able to do it a lot faster than that if you're speed running that kind of thing. But easy enough to clear in roughly 30 minutes or so. You have 35 minutes before you end up losing an extra multiplier, so it's not a crazy long run. So that's one nice thing that will come from running this. Is should be pretty nice and easy once you work your way up to M10 version to go ahead and get your nice easy M10 gold runs, 6k shards, get some good loot out of it. So definitely some things on this dungeon. They can go really fast south if things get out of hand. It is fairly lenient. You can get like 5 knocks or 5 respawns and still get a gold as long as you meet every other multiplier, every other thing you need, all your gatherables. You know, you should be alright. So you can see this boss, it is pretty dang annoying. So like I say, I'd go ahead and clear all the other ads before you fight this boss, just to make things a little bit simpler. See, he goes ahead and stuns everybody quite a bit. He spawns all these extra mobs in that come flying at you. So if you got other ads that you're dealing with, you can see people are getting stunned, so they get stunned and then the other ads start piling onto them. It can cause for a pretty dangerous situation. So with this nature mutation, you got a lot of these mobs that they get a lot of self-healing. So if you have anything that does cause disease, gives them less healing abilities, it can be beneficial. So if you do use the new heart rune that comes from this dungeon, it can be pretty helpful. Like the bile heart rune or something, whatever it's called. It's going to help negate enemy's ability to heal up, so it could come in pretty handy in this dungeon. But we can see this boss here, he does actually take quite a long time for us to get down as a 4-man group. There's a few bosses in here that are like that, and I think a lot of it does have to do with the nature mutation and a little bit of self-healing that they get. So at this point, we're just trying to keep moving right along while we're waiting for our teammate to join back up with us. Still not moving along very fast, but we're still trying to make some progress. If you wait too long, well, then we're gonna time fail, so we gotta keep making progress. So ideally in this room we would go ahead and we would pull everything right in and around the corner and stack this whole room. But some of our teammates were still trying to figure out the DPS situation, so wasn't really able to go in and make the full pull. So typically you just run right in here, taunt everything and stack it up. Where I am now, you wouldn't do this in 2 pulls, kinda small to do this in 2 separate pulls, that's for sure. Even as a 4-man, easily could have did this whole pull if our team was ready, but they weren't quite ready, so just kind of pulled a couple of mobs out and made a little bit of progress while we're killing some time. So this part right up ahead, it is the last lost part before we're going to switch back to Ancient. One named mob in here, we got one of these named ghosts with another ghost, and well, just gonna go right in the middle and we're gonna go ahead and drop a taunt on everything. So pretty basic part here, you just go ahead, taunt everything, AoE it down. Really nothing fancy, nothing special, just your typical tank and spank, so I like to say. Just go ahead and taunt everything, start doing some damage when you can, make sure you're holding the aggro, trying to find that heal to sit in, and let your DPS go to work. Let your healer do the healing, DPS to the DPS, and just make sure you're holding all of the aggro. So at this point, we are going to switch back to our Ancient set. So as you climb right up to the top here and get switched over, so if you go down, you're going to drop aggro, and well, you're not going to be able to switch your set. So like there's an argument that you could leave on 1 or 2 lost pieces because there is maybe a couple more lost mobs in here, but we're just gonna go full Ancient and we're gonna show you how you can deal with one of the named lost mobs. That makes it nice and easy, so you don't have to worry about the fact that you don't have your lost gear on. So this part, super basic, and there is an important thing you need to know. There's this little chest. Make sure you gather this chest or you're going to find yourself in trouble. So we just go right down in the middle. We get a taunt on everything. See that one guy was trying to play games with our healer, but we did have his taunt, so it's just a matter of time waiting for him to stop his animation of attacking the healer before he came back to us. So just super basic. Go right in the middle, do a taunt, and then just kind of keep doing some damage to them over time. Doing damage is going to help you hold aggro even when you don't taunt them, but I just kind of do the combination. Taunt plus damage equals, they're not going to go attack anybody else, that's for sure. Obviously they're still going to take some AoE damage, but so yeah, you definitely have to collect that chest back there, and just to be doubly sure in case someone didn't, I backtrack and say, I'm gonna grab this chest just in case, because you run into a situation. If you don't grab this chest, well, you can't turn the power off. So somebody's got to grab this handy dandy little orb of protection thing, and you get everybody through. Just kill this one little random mob. But just a couple of guys have to go up top. There is a piece of resource you have to gather up there, and you know, the guy with the protection, he has to let the guy that collected the chest through, and you go and turn off the power up there. And I'll show you in a second. We were waiting for our teammate, and it turned out that, well, the guy that had the little orb of protection, he was able to go on the far opposite side of this, and he was able to shortcut our teammate in here just a little bit faster. So right here, that's where, this is the resource you got to gather in right behind me. That's where you have to turn off the power by grabbing that orb out of the chest. But we're ready to move along. We finally do have our extra DPS back with us. Been kind of annoying this last 5 to 8 to 10 minutes, just kind of slow pushing. But now we can get back to business. So this part here, See, I go in and I hug the wall, and I go and stack on all these archers. So, biggest thing about here is we're trying to buy a little bit of time before we aggro this boss. He does cause some problems. He hits very, very hard. So, when you can, you want to go ahead and stack on the archers because melee comes to the range will not come to the melee. So we go ahead and we stack on the archers, and that way our DPS can just take them out really fast, and that way the majority of the mobs are dead while we are finishing off this boss. So this boss can cause some problems. If you just go right ahead and run straight to the boss, well, everything's gonna be spread all over the place, and you're gonna run into problems because you're not gonna be able to stack heals. So definitely highly recommend just go ahead, hug the wall over to the right corner, go stack on these archers, and then that boss will end up pulling into you. So this next little part, I just like to take out this archer first. So I go ahead and get his aggro, and we drag him back a little bit. You know, we try and take him out before we get the boss aggro, just so we're not dealing with an archer while we're fighting this boss. And then it allows us to just go ahead and put 100% focus into taking out this boss and AoEing all the little ads he keeps spawning back in. So anytime you can take out a ranged first, just go ahead and do that. And just stacking on the boss, every time that he does spawn ads in, I am trying to do a nice little AoE taunt just to get the aggro on everything so it doesn't force our healer to have to be dodging mobs too often. But we do have some nice gravity wells, which at times will just suck everything right up into one nice AoE group. And these mobs he spawns in, they're annoying, but they are super squishy. So moving right along, you have to go and place an orb in that thing, which opens up this kind of like a veiled wall to access this next hallway. So you go ahead and place that orb in that little thingamajinger back there, and we just go ahead and AoE this little tiny group down. Once again, nothing special here. If you wanted, you probably could skip this little group, run right on past it, but we take it out. Extra mob kills can give you extra points, but so does extra time. So at some point you're kind of deciding, are we trying to get extra mobs to up our score, or are we trying to get extra time to up our score? So one little resource note here. So typically what I do here is grab the taunt on these archers. You can see they just kept hitting me hard, pop to paw, and they get me right back down. Dang buggers wouldn't leave me alone, but that is my job as a tank after all. So we just go and we line of sight everything around this corner. I get the aggro on these couple of mobs that are hiding behind the corner, but then we suck everything in quite nicely. Usually I try to hang closer to the corner so the archers get sucked into the stack too. But, you know, I guess I didn't get pulled as close to the corner as I would have liked to. So, for one, I was actually kind of low on health, and my pots were on cooldown and all that good stuff. So I was buying a little bit of extra time for one. But, ideally, we stack this stuff a little bit closer to the corner. That way the archers, they get to join in on our AoE party. They don't have to feel left out. So once you're here, if you haven't done any big skips, you're typically going to have the mob count already. So you can see we have the 4 times multiplier, which means we have the mob count. So we don't actually need to kill these mobs, but we do need to mine that star metal there. So as long as you buy enough time for somebody to mine that star metal, go ahead and move right along. And these mobs here, you're going to want to kill them, regardless of whether you're at the mob count or not, and you'll see why shortly. Because there's a room that can be pretty sketchy right after this one, so we don't want to drag these mobs into that room, and we want to clear this room because we are going to call one of the mobs back into the hallway. Because at this point we do not have Lost Gear anymore, but we have a nice named Lost mob to fight. So I'm going to take my hatchet, gonna chuck it at the lost mob, and we suck him right into this hallway. That way we can take him out all by his lonesome. He doesn't really get to get involved in any AoE parties. Poor bugger, huh? But yeah, it can be a problem if you just go right into this room and fight him. You can get rooted inside that room, and well, if you get rooted and your team is spread out and this lost boss, you can do some pretty heavy damage to anybody that's not in the AoE heal, since you have Ancient Ward on and you're at high level mutation, so he could do some good damage. But this actually makes it quite simple. So this boss, you see, a bunch of us are stunned in place, or we're rooted in place rather, I should say. So when he does that mechanic, everyone gets rooted in place, and if people aren't inside of heals and that lost mob starts hitting them, well, you can get yourself in trouble. So there's 2 named mobs in here, and well, there is 1 extra boss that you can go and fight. You don't absolutely have to get him, because I think you can skip him and you still get your mob count, but it doesn't hurt to go and take him out just for the drop, if nothing else. So we did have 1 player that went in and he tried grabbing the aggro, but I think he got rooted or something, and then he got taken out, because obviously as a DPS, if you get stuck in place, you get rooted or something, and well, you're a little bit squishy as a DPS. So a named mob with 2 other mobs, they can take you out quite nicely. But regardless, we beat the time and everything. You can see we don't beat the time by a whole lot, but we killed a ton of time when we were trying to figure out our situation of our 5th DPS. And so, take a few of these tips. For example, this room, call this lost mob out of this room and fight him alone, and it's going to save you loads of trouble. And, just by running this dungeon smart, it actually should make this dungeon pretty easy for you. Obviously, if you're running with a random group and there's miscommunications, things can still go very south very fast. But once you get it down, this should be a nice fun one for you to run and get your nice quick easy gold runs in. Get your shards, get your drops, and get along with the day. So we are at the very last boss. And if you got good DPS, this boss, super simple, goes down super fast. So there's 2 stages to this boss. You gotta take him out once. You can see he kind of assembles himself here when you first meet him. So the very first round, you take him out and he falls apart, but he reassembles himself and you gotta take him out a second time. So just super basic the first time around. Just tank and spank, so they like to say. You're holding his aggro, you're constantly attacking him to do some damage, but when he does spawn in ads, you're going to want to try and aggro them, but I was kind of getting knocked around, so I wasn't really able to taunt them at that time, but my DPS just went and wiped them out. They're super squishy mobs, but you can see how fast this guy's health bar is going down. So you can see, we're basically just sitting here and doing heavy attack after heavy attack. Keeping out our sword because we do have that leadership perk, and you can see, pulled out my hatchet and I tried getting some hits on him, but he ended up squirting around me. I ended up squirting around him, one of the 2. But this is the part where you're going to want your whole team to go and stack up in one big group. And that's because if you're spread out, this boss is going to go jumping all around. He's going to chase the guy that's probably the furthest away from him. But if you stack up on him, it's going to allow you to do DPS. But if you're all spread out, it's going to take a while to DPS him down, because he's going to land on individual dudes and you're going to be trying to dodge his attacks. So you're not going to get any DPSing down on him. But you can see when we all stay stacked up the whole time, he just lands on top of us and we can go right to town DPSing him. Any ads that spawn in, we just AoE them down. So just once again, big AoE party. Everybody stack on top of each other. The boss is going to land on your whole group, and you're going to be able to go ahead and take him out really, really fast. So obviously this is only an M8, but you could see that it's pretty easily beat. We are over gear scored. You know, most of us are at like 625, I think. One of us was just barely at the gear score recommendation needed for this run. But so there you have it, M8, and fairly easily beat. So can run into some trouble, but once you get the mechanics down for this run, I think you'll find out it can be easy. Just get some good communication going between your squad, you know, take the safe route, pull that lost mob out, fight him alone since you're in ancient gear, and you're gonna be just fine. So hope you liked it. Go ahead and start working on those mutations for Starstone, and we'll catch you on the next one.